Hello friends and welcome into my little studio. Today I'm going to talk about 5 creative drawing exercises that will boost your creativity and imagination and also help you come up with new ideas. I know how stressful and frustrating it is to search for references online every single day in order to draw something in your sketchbook. As me, I think a lot of you want to practice more this year without having a lot of pressure on and also enjoy the sketchbook time. So these exercises are meant for this purpose, to have fun, to come up with ideas, to let creativity flow and also to draw more, because this is the purpose, right? So let's get started and just have fun. The first exercise is more of a warm-up exercise, and what you have to do is just choose a simple shape like a circle or triangle or a square and then add on top of that. So for example, in my case that I chose a circle, I have to think of objects and subjects that are made of circles or that have some circles inside. So the first thing I thought when I drew the first circle was an egg. So of course I drew a toast. And then the second circle, I thought about big roundish eyes. And then I thought that these eyes could belong to an animal and in particular to a frog. So basically, these are the first things that came to my mind, and maybe you come up with other ideas. But basically, our mind function in this way. You first come up with the simplest ideas, the more obvious ones, and then once you start filling the page, you'll find it harder to come up with ideas, and you'll have to think a lot more, and then you'll come up with ideas that are more interesting at some point. So don't be frustrated if the first ideas are too monotonous and obvious to you, because you have to give some time to your mind to come up with ideas and to be creative. Creativity is like an engine that have to warm up and then it will flow, it will work very well. So give it some time. Also, another thing that you'll notice is that you'll draw basically what you're used to and what you see more often in your life. So you may draw things that you see on your desk, or maybe things that you've eaten during the day before the drawing session, or maybe things that you usually use in your life, or you enjoy, or you would love to have. So this page, because I suggest you to fill a whole page, even if it's hard at some point to add things, but try thinking a lot about your experiences, your personal life, and this kind of exercise will basically help you to find your unique voice. I know that it's a bit scary to draw with pens and fountain pens because the marks are basically not erasable, but think in this way: you don't draw for anyone, you draw for yourself, and this is an exercise, and as the word says, it's not something that you already know, but it's something you have to practice. So you're training your mind and your hand, of course. It took me basically half an hour or 40 minutes to complete this page, because at some point I was a bit lost. I didn't know other objects with the circle shape. So I started just looking at my desk and trying to find things that had that shape incorporated. And so I've come up with a lot of stationary things and also food, but also nature, because I also thought of my walks and what I usually see during my walks. And yeah, it's a very nice exercise, and try to push yourself to draw and fill a whole page. By the end of this exercise, I find out that I really enjoy drawing food, and even if I don't draw it so often, I think I'm pretty good at drawing it. But there are other topics like animal drawing that I'm not so good at, and so I pointed out some of the things that I have to improve and practice more, of course from reference photos, because my imagination couldn't work so well without having some reference practice drawing. And so I point out and I took notes about the things that I have to improve and that I want to practice more. And I think this is a useful thing you can do by the end of this exercise too. The second exercise is more about creating stories starting from cutouts. So basically you have to cut out some pieces of newspapers and magazines, and it doesn't matter the subjects and the objects, but then you have to tape them down on your sketchbook. These were about home decor because I've chosen a home decor magazine. So I started with this wooden door. It's very simple, but since it's made of wood, I thought about woods in general and nature. And at the beginning, I thought adding a mouse who was hiding behind the door, but then I thought of a girl character, so I added this tiny girl and in this little opening in the door. And then I added some texture on the door, more of a wooden, very old wood texture in general. So I've used again a pen because again in this case it's better to use pens, and because a pencil wouldn't show too much on this newspaper texture, so it was easier this way. Of course a lot of things could go wrong, but the purpose of this exercise is coming up with ideas and with stories. And I think starting with an object or something that is already drawn, that is already there, is easier than starting with a blank paper. I've also brought in some color pencils, but just a few of them because otherwise I would have spent a lot of time coloring and I didn't want this. So I've just brought in a sepia and then a red and a blue and a sort of very pale green. And these were the colors I went with through all the page. Now you can use the same character for other objects on this page, like I do here. I've used the same girl character for this teacup candle. It's a very strange object, but anyway, you can use the same character to create different stories and different episodes of his life. And in this case, the little girl is lighting this candle with a match, and since she's very little, she's standing on a chair, and I think this is a very cute idea, and I think I'm going to develop it further because I don't know, it came out of nowhere, and as you may notice during this exercise, you will definitely come up with ideas that you never thought of. Also, to draw that little fire that was also the main point of this little scene, I've used a yellow Tombow just because it had a lot more color than the color pencils. Some ideas on this page may seem a bit too obvious, like the case of this lamp, which I've immediately thought of a hot air balloon. So I drew that because I didn't want to spend too much time on every single object. I wanted my mind just to flow, and I would put on paper just what came to my mind, and that's it, even if I could put a bit more thought into it. But the fact is that even the simplest idea can be very interesting to us personally, and it doesn't matter if other people find them obvious and simple. Here, in the case of this pot, I immediately thought of a girl, an indigenous girl with a lot of jewelry and a particular haircut. And I don't know why I came up with this idea, but this is how my mind worked, and I drew what I thought on the moment. And yeah, I think this is nice, even if the shape of the pot is not so suitable to a human face. But it doesn't matter because an idea is just an idea, so put it on a paper. Another obvious and simple idea was the one with the table, where I've used the little piece of wood and then I put just a plant on top, so I didn't thought too much. But then when I went to the dishes, I've had this idea which was much more interesting and I was so happy about. Of course, the dirty dishes are found in a sink, but I also thought of a series of downfalls and then a little mice who is fishing in this water, and I think I want to develop it further into a sort of illustration because it's really nice to see the fact that there's a character on top of these dishes. yeah, don't be afraid to draw what comes to your mind, even if the ideas are not so interesting at the beginning. But after the first or second attempt, you'll see that you'll come up with ideas that are more appealing and that you'll be more satisfied with. A lot of artists are doing this exercise, and personally I've done it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, since first I've discovered it, because it's so useful. And I think over all these exercises is my favorite one, my go-to exercise that I do at least once a week, and it's about painting or drawing these kind of bubbles of colors. You can use whatever tool you want. You can use paint, you can use I don't know, color pencils, but in this case I use just a standard highlighter. And what I suggest you is to use a light color, but don't use dark colors because you can't draw on top of them too well. So just start with a very simple light color and draw a shape, a spontaneous shape that comes to your mind. You don't have to think about it too much. Just paint whatever shapes comes to your hand. Let your hand do the job. Don't think, don't use your mind, because otherwise you'll influence the shape, the final output of the shape. So draw it as it comes. And once you drew the shape, look at it for a couple of seconds or so, a couple of minutes if you need it, and try to figure out what you see inside the shape. So this exercise is about drawing within the shapes and not outside the shapes. And when staring at these shapes, just look at how the color is layering. Maybe you've spotted a face, an eye, a nose, and then start from there. I usually spot, I don't know, in this case, the shape of a mushroom, for example, and then I immediately started from there. Or maybe the shape of a face profile, and I first drew that, and then I add on top of that, like I create the whole character, maybe I add the details. But I think in this case I don't have to think too much as I did in the previous exercise, so I don't have to come up with stories from my head because everything is within the shape and I don't have to search anywhere else, basically. Some shapes may be harder than others to figure out. Like, for example, in my case, it was the first shape. At first, I thought of an elephant, but I didn't want to draw elephants or animals in general. I wanted to focus on this page on portraits and characters in general, but you don't have to set this limit for yourself. Just draw everything you see and you think you've spotted within the shape. So if you want to set like a theme, a topic for you, like in my case, the portrait, you can do it, but you are not forced to do this. So when I don't know what to draw on a shape, I just go to the others and let it for another moment because at some point I'll figure out something will come to my mind. So I don't stress too much on each shape. I go to the easiest ones and then I go back to the others. And as you may notice, you'll come up with drawings that you've never do otherwise. So I never exaggerate my shapes and I never exaggerate my faces, but when I do this exercise, I come up with characters that are so much more appealing and have a lot of personality, and I love them so much. Another thing that I usually don't do is drawing male characters and faces, but when I was looking at these shapes, I could only see male faces. I don't know why. So I went with it and I just drew male, a lot of males, and also some females. But this is the reason why I do this exercise, because it pushes me to draw things I would have never thought of. This exercise instead is more about thinking out of the box and thinking of values and negative space. So what you have to do is draw some boxes on your page and use some graphite. You can use both color pencils, like a black color pencil, I suggest you to use a soft one like a 6B or a 4B pencil. And as you can see later, I also use a color pencil, so you can use both of them or just one of them. And so once the box is ready, you can pick up your eraser. You can use your standard eraser. Just use the pointy tip of the eraser, or if you have one, you can use a mono eraser, which is this kind of pencil, which is very pointy and very precise. And I also have this Mitsubishi one, which is a bit larger and it erases a bit less. But anyway, any eraser is good for this exercise. Now you have to choose the subject for your drawing, and I start with a simple one, which is a tree, a simple tree, and I start erasing like little parts, the branches, and I also leave out some parts because it's nice to see some texture inside, because the tree will also have some darker parts. So in this case, you're erasing the lighter parts of the drawing and you let out the darkest part of the drawing. Also, if you want to avoid smudging, just use a brush to brush out the leftovers of the eraser. Now let's choose a more complex subject, and in this case I'm using the black color pencil to fill in the box, and then I'll use this mono eraser, which is very subtle and precise, in which erases a lot better than the other. And I erase the frontal part of the house, but I don't erase everything about the house. I just erase the lightest parts. Like in my case, I decided the lightest part will be the windows and the frontal part of the house. And then I'm very gentle on the other parts because I don't want them to be so light. So basically you have to think of the values in your drawing. So what are the darkest and the mid tones and also the lightest tones in your drawing. And at the end you can also add a few details with the pencil if you want. This exercise is very useful to experiment with different effects that you wouldn't get otherwise, like for example a strong lighting in the dark, and this is what I wanted to achieve with this character. I wanted her to have a candle in her hand, and the light of the candle will enlighten the face and some parts of the clothes and the hair, but not all the character. So I used both eraser. This exercise will help you come up with new ideas and also think of scenes and subjects from different perspectives and not just from the point of view of colors, because here you don't have colors, but you have to think of values, which is very, very important. The last exercise is about drawing without lifting the pen off of the paper, and I decided to combine both drawing from reference and doing this warm-up exercise. So I went to my living room and I decided to draw my plants that I have in the corner of the room. And yeah, I think there are a few challenges to this exercise. First of all, you have to think where to start the drawing. So you should start from the things that are in front or on top, but in my case I started from the top, which was not a great idea. But anyway, you can then find a solution to go back to the top or to the bottom and continue drawing without still lifting the pen. And yeah, this is a nice exercise to find solutions and also to be very mindful with your brush strokes, because before drawing with a pen you have to think of how the line flows and about perspective and what are the parts that are in front and what are those behind and so on. The great thing about this exercise is that by the end of it, you've come up with some new ways of drawings and new shapes and also new line art. I think that if I had drawn these plants from reference with a pencil like I usually do, I wouldn't obtain this kind of result, this kind of drawing, which has much more personality and a lot of like a lot of life to it. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm sure you will see, and I'm sure you'll notice if you do this exercise at home that there's something different to this drawing that you wouldn't achieve otherwise. Sometimes, for example, I want to get perspective wrong because I want to communicate something in my illustration, and basically I can't get it wrong on purpose. While on this drawing, I basically got perspective wrong because this is how it turned out, and I couldn't make a lot of decisions because I couldn't correct things. And it's such much better, and yeah, overall, I'm sure you'll enjoy doing this exercise. I hope you found at least one exercise that you really enjoyed and that you want to practice in your sketchbook further. And if you want, you can let me know in the comments, of course. Thank you for watching this video and see you next week in the next video. Bye!